afternoon. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Go ahead and
He was like, whatever.
please sit under your corresponding. Name tags. Sorry about that. We're going to start off this evening with questions that were submitted through the Google form. Like it said online, some of the questions could be consolidated because they kind of cover the same topics. And then also, if we have time, because we do have to keep on schedule, we're taking them somewhere else this evening at 6 o'clock, so we're leaving here at 5:30. But if we have time, then we will take questions from the crowd. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we have okay. So I'd like to start off, we can go this way. So if you could go down the line and introduce yourself, give us your name, your current or last district, and what your role was, and then explain why La Junta.
Hi, I'm Monica Johnson. I'm currently a consultant, an educational consultant for the Colorado Association of School Executives, and I build mentorship programs for executive leaders in public education, so superintendents and principals. I was the superintendent of Strasburg School District, was my last school district. Oh, and why La Junta? Because this is my home. I grew up here, I raised my children here, my husband and I both graduated from here. My mom drove you on a school bus for 42 years. So La Junta is my home.
Good evening, my name is Patrick Crumples. I just finished my 9th year as principal at Mount Fort Carson High School. Before that, I was a principal and executive director of education in Pueblo School District. Why La Junta? I actually started my teaching career. My first job was right here in La Junta many years ago. Love the area. Met my beautiful wife who's from Los Animas. Her family still lives here. So love the area, loved our time here, and really want to make this our last stop and our last home.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Isaac Solano. I'm currently employed by Denver Public Schools. I am the manager of leader development for our school district. So what that means is when we have teachers who want to transition into administration roles, myself and my team support those teachers as they grow their skills, learn coaching, and understand what it's like to be an administrator. Prior to that, I was the associate dean of Emily Griffin Technical College in Denver Public Schools. Why La Junta? It's a wonderful community, small town. I've always envisioned myself leading a district this size, and I know I have the skills, at least looking at your unified improvement plan, that are going to be needed to take La Junta off the turnaround clock and on to better and brighter things.
Hello, I'm Jared Wilson. I'm currently here at East Otero School District as the Chief Academic Officer. I came in January. My goal ultimately brought me to La Junta. It wasn't for academic or for career, it was for family. Did that, I got to spend time with my family, grow our family, and then as I got intertwined in this community, saw that it was somewhere that I wanted to stay, somewhere I wanted to keep my kids, somewhere I wanted to keep my family and really grow and love.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start with Dr. Combs with the first question. So previously, a superintendent in the district emphasized transparency and communication, such as using Facebook Live to provide information to the community. The relationship between East Otero School District, Otero College, and the city of La Junta has changed over the past year. So if selected, what steps would you take to strengthen these partnerships and promote open, consistent communication to the public?
So transparency would be the first thing. I think we have to have great relationships with our partners. We're all working towards a common goal. So the steps I would take is just connecting and making sure that we have strong partnerships, that we're working together, we're communicating with all stakeholders, and then we're really working as a collective community to make this as great of an education system and a community as possible. So it would be really working on an everyday basis with all these partners, getting to know them, sharing resources, but really building a real sustainable partnership.
I think in a school district this size, it's very important that the leader is visible on a daily basis. What I mean by that is they need to be in schools and classrooms as often as possible, but they need to be out in the community, interacting with community partners as well. And so I make a concentrated effort to make sure that I was out in the community, at the community college, out understanding what the Chamber of Commerce is and their priorities are, and also understanding our nonprofit world and our business world. That way, so we could come together and meet the needs of our community, because ultimately, our students that are educated in our schools are going to be the professionals that take over these institutions as we move forward. And if we do it right and are collaborative from the beginning, our community benefits from that tremendously.
As Scott mentioned before, I think that it starts with relationships, building those, reestablishing those, looking at ways that we can bring the community in. As many struggles we have here at East Otero, we have a lot of great things that we're doing well. And I think sometimes we struggle with just communicating those and really reaching the demographic of families that we have in the community, whether it's changing on how we're communicating, why we're communicating, or just making clear what exactly is happening on our day-to-day. And again, being visible, also, it was clear to me that being visible in these games, whether it be a wrestling match, whether basketball, whatever that is, you really get to resonate with the people in the community. You see them outside of just the regular academic realm, and I think that was really important in trying to connect with our community.
So I don't think that, oftentimes people will say our biggest problem is communication, and we think that we've communicated, and I don't think you can ever over communicate. And so I've always appreciated when you were talking about using Facebook Live and having those opportunities to really over communicate to people, or in your opinion, thinking that you're over communicating, because in the absence of information, people create their own. So when we don't tell people exactly what's going on, from our point of view, they create their own narrative. And that may not be the right one. And so we want to make sure that it's our narrative. And that's true in creating those trusting relationships with the college, or, and this is the first I've heard of that. It kind of hurts my heart a little bit, because we've always had such a strong connection with the college and with other community entities. And so I think coming back and creating that trusting relationship, and that we are in this together, and we're going to rely on one another in that. So we're going to compete against, maybe other communities, but we want to be together and really kind of create something that works for our community.
So studies show that school building conditions affect student engagement. At our high school, students have joked online about issues like damaged ceiling tiles. Meanwhile, arts programs that support creativity and critical thinking have been cut or reduced due to limited resources and staffing. This fuels perception, while Hunta undervalues the arts compared to athletics. How will you maintain both educational quality and financial stability over time? And then what steps would you take to address the urgent maintenance needs while pursuing long-term updates? And how will you support ongoing investment in arts, education, and extracurriculars in La Junta? So I know that's 3 questions in this topic, but I'll give you time, and if you forget the ones, I'll repeat.
Thank you. We have a wonderful tour this afternoon of all of our East Otero buildings, and some of our buildings are in really great condition, others need a little bit of work. When I think of the high school, I thought that there was some awesome things happening there, and also we need to address the elephant in the room of the roof. I know that this school year we applied for a BEST grant, and we weren't as fortunate to get that this year, but I think that's something that needs to be a priority with this community as we move forward, because that will be able to help us address the high school, whether it's replacing the roof in its entirety or getting a completely new building, with I think both options could be on the table. I have experience with supporting best grant work. My career early on in Sheridan Public Schools, we built the entire new 3 through 8th grade school due to best funding. And in the metro area, Metro Denver, that is very odd for a school district to earn that type of funding. You know, typically rural communities do that. I think once we figure out the correct and creative solutions to address our physical plant issues, that will help us then invest in programs like art and music and programs that some of our students find very, very important, particularly when these programs help them succeed in math and science and reading. As I think about, you know, also supporting our athletes as well, we do have incredible athletic facilities here. And at the same time, we need to make sure that our artists, our creative thinkers have that same space. So if and when I'm superintendent, I make a priority to understand what our needs are from our art teachers, our music teachers, our band teachers, and see what we can do within our current budget, with our current fiscal situation, and then think, you know, how could we be creative and nimble and reach for outside grants and outside support to continue building upon our programming, that way so our arts programming looks as awesome as our athletic facilities.
Might have you just read that question. I think I'll start off, I'll be fine. Yes, the elephant in the room, this roof at the high school, it's been leaking, it's causing issues. It, you know, frankly, it sits at the front of my headache the entire time as I'm trying to navigate, and have been for the last few months. I know the best grant is something that we've looked at. We've also looked at a couple of different alternative ways that we can, you know, try to make some improvements with that. One piece that I think that I hadn't really highlighted on before was I always felt like there was a missing voice when it came to the best grant, where I didn't really hear a lot from the community. I didn't really hear a lot from really outside of central office and some of the admin and school board meetings, that I think that there needed to be more communication, more collaboration with the community about what they were wanting and what they were willing to do to try to get that goal, to meet that initiative. I think that there's a lot of talk between whether we want to just go for a roof or we do want to go for another building, what that would look like, what that timeline would look like, what kind of stress that might put on the community and how we could accomplish that. I do think it is a priority. It is something that we need to look at, but we also have to be realistic and financially savvy with the few funds we have and acknowledging that those funds are changing every day. When we discuss the kind of difference between our athletics and our, I don't want to say activities, but everything else that our kids get to engage in after school, I kept hearing that Lahana pride. As that question came up, and that idea that when you go to these sporting events, you see that Lahana pride. It shows through where people care. They truly care about what their kids are doing, what their kids are engaging in. And I think shifting that focus and highlighting all the other great things that we can do is how I can get more community behind those projects. And then with the collaboration of my community and looking at how we can uniquely use our funds to kind of start pushing money into those other programs is going to be beneficial. I know that in the past we've had that, where I think we've struggled with that is kind of in retention as well as recruitment for professionals in those fields. I know right now we've struggled with having a music program, K-12. And I know that we've had some money put there, but haven't necessarily gotten the right people in the right spots to fulfill those programs and make it happen. Not for a lack of trying, but I think that we can come up with some diverse ideas to make that a reality.
So I taught local music here and was really fortunate to work with Kelly Joe in the drama department, the fine arts department. And oftentimes people will say that perhaps fine arts is not given the same status as some other things are given. One of the problems that we're having in public education is not really necessarily that people don't value fine arts or that they value something over fine arts. It's a scarcity. It's a scarcity issue. There are not teachers that are out there. You know, if Mary Blue was your last primary music teacher, it's not because people weren't looking for music teachers, it's because it's an issue of scarcity. And so we have to work together with colleges and universities to address the overall scarcity issue that we're having with teachers across the board. And that, I mean, it's not necessarily, I don't think, an issue of I don't value fine arts. You know, when I taught here in this building before it was renovated, the choir room was taught in the old football locker room downstairs. And I did really feel a little unvalued, you know, when I had to go down there, to teach. But it was an issue of like, where is there space to do that? And it was fun to build that program. We had a nice, strong program. And it takes the people who are there. So we have to look for those staff have to become part of the solution on a grander scale than just saying it's just a Lahaina problem, because it isn't. It isn't. It is a huge problem across the United States. I have written and received 2 large BEST grants. One when I was a superintendent principal in Kim and we built a new building, and another one in Strasburg when we did a major renovation. BEST grant looks for student safety. I mean, that's the priority. When they fund based upon safety and security, and that gets the highest rate. If you looked at the legislation last year that was passed, Senate Bill 1448 is the new school finance formula, and it cannot be fully implemented because the state experienced a huge financial deficit of over, well, now they're even going to add to it $700 million more that the state is facing, and they took money out of BEST. So less money is going to go into BEST. BEST is primarily funded through marijuana tax. People think that marijuana tax goes into your general fund. It doesn't. It went into BEST, and it also is funded by the land usage. But it has been capped. So when you want to do a new building, it's, you know, you have to bond out. Your community has to put skin in the game. And you have to bond sometimes to your full capacity. And in this district, it would be over 2 million. So, you know, you have to look at those ways. If you're going to make a big project, a $9 million new roof is not something you take out of your fund balance, because frankly, I think we need to figure that out in this district and know what our fund balance is, but that's not where you get it. So you have to look at what is the priority with BEST, because that's going to be your option to get it. The other option is to go to your voters. But you don't have a $9 million bond ability in this district. So the voters, even if they voted all the way out to their full bonding capacity, couldn't replace a $9 million roof, nor could replace a $40 million high school. So we're going to have to really work with those partners in order to make that happen.
So the first part of the question about the high school, it would be working with the community, trying to come up with a long-term plan. We have all the constraints, as others have mentioned, but it is really figuring out what is the community value, what is our long-term plan, how are we going to not only take care of the high school, but make sure the other buildings are kept up as well, because that's the hard part. When, you know, I always said, my analogy is it's like having 3 cars. You know, at what point does the cost of that car having to be replaced all the time when you need to make a decision of taking care of a new car? But that's not something that's done by one person. That's something that's done as a community, what we value, when we need to be able to do that, and to navigate the financial restrictions that we're dealing with here in the state of Colorado, and more in particular right here in this community. It is an issue across the state. As far as the arts go, it's a lot of the same things. I think the biggest problem we've had in the state of Colorado and across the country is finding teachers in these hard to fill positions. It's not like, you know, we honor what we value, and I will tell you, I value arts. I think the arts and athletics, they are there for a reason. They keep kids engaged in school. They give them a reason to go to school. I think it's one of the most valuable things we do. And ultimately, we want to make sure our kids have great outcomes and are able to go on and have lived successful lives. But part of when we think about our schooling, most of us, we don't think about our calculus class or our physics class. We think back about, you know, the ball games, Friday nights. We think about, you know, a choir concert. And so it is important to be able to work and try to find teachers and retain teachers. It was funny this morning when I came in, somebody, someone said, you know, you stole Josh Race, who was a music teacher here, and he was fantastic. I know he was fantastic here as well. And I said, I didn't steal him. He went to 2 different schools before he came to me. But being able to find someone like that, that is how we're going to be able to do that. And it's going to take work. It's going to be figuring out not just in that area, but finding a woodshop teacher, finding all these folks in a time when we are in a real teacher shortage. So it would be working with the team, the admin team, principals, teachers, community members, students, to make sure we're able to go out and find the people that can come in and bring back the Tiger Pride, the Hunter Pride, with programs, not just athletics, but in all extracurricular activities.
So that touched on student engagement. The next question I have, because their learning environment is also our educators and district staff working environment. One can't be better than the other. They should be, the culture should be positive and the same. So what is your personal practice for engaging with employees? So like, do you have an open door policy, or how do you show you value their input and perspectives?
I would say my biggest practice, yes, I always have an open door, but really just putting the focus on relationships. You know, stepping into this district, being new in January, it was very important to me to make sure that I was stepping into as many classrooms as I could, stepping into the bus barn, stepping into the kitchen, stepping into, you know, any time that I could share a role with somebody that was doing something that I could relate to them with, have a conversation with, see what their life was like. Allowed me to gain a better perspective. I like that open door communication. I like being as open as I can with people. But again, I think you just have to start establishing those relationships and then build systems that show that you value that as much. I had a great conversation with some people about difference between raising our salaries versus just giving bonuses. And how that hits the staff differently, where they feel like a bonus is just a very temporary Band-Aid fix, and they're looking for systems that really reward them for years to come. And I think part of that piece with communicating, engaging with staff is just building those relationships and building those systems that show that I honor you as a human. And when I'm asking you to do 110%, you're asking the same from me, and then getting behind the same initiative.
I think it's really important for any organization to know what their asset is. What is your biggest asset? And sometimes in a school district, and in other organizations as well, we don't recognize that our biggest and best asset are our employees. They are our asset. Sometimes we think it's the school building. Sometimes we think it's students. The students are our asset. Students are our customers. They're people that we're here to serve. But who's serving them? Our greatest asset, and that's our staff. And how do we make sure that they know all of the time that that's what they are to us? You know, 75% of the budget goes to staff. So obviously 75% of our budget is going to our greatest asset. And are we treating people that way? When I was in Strasburg, I used to teach because I wanted people to know that I was a teacher and that I could teach. And and so what happens when you're the superintendent and you say, I'm gonna come teach a class, you know what class they give you, right? Because you just pick any class, just any class and I'll come teach it. And you notice what they're doing, they're getting together, and they're saying, now which is the honors class that we have? That's the class that we're gonna have Mr. Johnson come teach. And so one time I went to teach a 5th grade class, and I was a high school teacher, middle school, high school teacher, not 5th grade. I had a 5th grade class, great kids, not necessarily honorary, but could talk, like loved to talk. But it was great because it gave me an idea of what happens every day in the lives of these people who come, who touch and put a fingerprint on the page of the life of a kid. And what an amazing honor that is. What an honor it is. When people send to us what's most important to them in their entire world, and they say, please take my child. And they're handing them over to someone who they respect. That's our asset. And we need to make sure that I know everybody's name, and I know where you're coming from, and I know how hard it is at what you're doing, and that you'll let me step in and teach your class.
So my approach is, I like to get to know people. I like to know who I'm working with, who I'm serving with. I want to know their families. I want to know that they know that I value them, and that it isn't phony. It is truly just the way I am. I want to make sure that I get to them, I talk to them, And that goes the same with students and with parents being at events and communicating, showing that you need to show up, you need to be present. And I think that goes a long ways with staff, with community members, when they say, oh, he's always there, he cares about our kids. And it has to be truly something that it's not fake, it is something you work towards, but it is just making sure people feel valued and you're connected with them. I think there's no big, silver bullet, it's just being nice, being kind, and making sure that people know they're valued. Sorry.
When I think about my personal practice for engaging employees, I think about when I began my career in school district administration. I began my career in Sheridan Public Schools as a district administrator. And that school district, just very similar to East Otero, has 4 schools and a bus barn, athletics facility, and a couple of other auxiliary buildings. And that particular superintendent, Patrick Sandos, handed me a key fob and he said, I want you in buildings every single day. A district this size, there's no reason you shouldn't be in buildings every single day. I didn't know what that meant at first, but after a couple of weeks of hanging out at lunch duty, going to the principal's office at the high school to see what they were up to, understanding how kids engage on the playground and how people were supervising them. That's what I think about supporting employees, to get to know their work environment, to get to know what drives our teachers, why they teach what they teach, why they're here, because there are a lot of choices in education. And what I love about East Otero from learning about the community, it's a very tight-knit place, it's very proud Tigers. And then when I think about inputs and perspectives, I think it's very, very important that we have diverse inputs and diverse perspectives, because I like to say that the answer is always in the room. And what I mean by that is when we work together and we co-create and we collaborate, we could find the answer. It might not be something that everyone agrees to, but it's something that we can come to a consensus upon and move forward. And that's just the type of leadership I want to have with employees, or I do strive to have with employees. Right now, I manage 4 people, and it's a nice load to manage, but in the past, I managed up to 22 people. And it's always about communication, understanding who they are as individuals, and understanding why they have a passion to do what they do.
So staying on the topic of employees, and then also how we have trouble with filling these positions. So I think the majority of the time that I have been on the board, we have had to declare a critical shortage. So the question is, do you support district-sponsored H-1B visas for teachers who have completed a J-1 program and are fulfilling the 2-year home residency requirement?
I think that is, kind of goes back to a little bit of looking at bringing in some different perspectives. So like, why would you not consider someone who's coming from another place, another country, who certainly has fulfilled whatever requirements that it is that they need to come to. I've had several colleagues who've been incredibly successful in that program. I know that you have a couple of employees actually in this building, I think, who probably have gone through that program as well. One of the things I think that's been difficult for people in that program has been a cultural shift, and how do I, I'm coming from a different country, very much a different culture, very much a different language, and coming to what I think the United States looks like and what I think Colorado looks like, which is a mountain, like we all live on a mountain. And then they come into this area and they go, this isn't exactly what I thought, right? But we have to make sure, if you were sitting there in a room interviewing people who all came from Colorado and they all graduated from UNC, you would have the exact same expectations. And so if this person sitting across from you is a quality educator, is someone who has a passion, what does it matter? What does it matter?
So I support making sure we get great educators in front of our kids, and any means necessary, whether it's being creative and finding folks that have a bachelor's degree or go with kids, and we send them to an alternative licensing program, whether it is hiring somebody from outside of our country, but we have to make sure that whatever we do, we're maintaining our standard, what our expectations are for our students. So we want quality people, and like I said, I'll do whatever I need to do to get quality people in front of our students. And so I do support it, but I want to make sure that we have a high standard and we're continuing to find folks that are going to really do a great job and create a long-lasting, positive experience for our students.
I support district-sponsored visas as well. In addition to that, I think it's very, very important that we exhaust every single pool that we can for quality teacher candidates. And what I mean by that is Colorado has a number of great teachers colleges across the state, whether they're up north at UNC or in Alamosa or in the Denver metro area. And I think a community like La Junta has to really highlight all of its positives to get folks from those pools, in addition to international candidates here. It's a beautiful place to be and live. And I think in addition to exhausting all of these pools, we need to make sure that we have the systems and the structures in place. So when people come here, they want to stay here. They want to grow roots. They want to be successful here, because it's very, very tough to come to a new community and feel isolated. So we need to make sure that when we're searching for candidates and our critical vacancies, we have enough support systems that they want to stay and be successful.
I think it all kind of goes back to culture and really cultivating the best that we can. Yes, I agree, bringing in all these people with different, diverse backgrounds, it is crucial for our kids. It gives them a different perspective. But something that always comes to mind is, do our systems support those individuals? What does it look like when everyone here goes home for a holiday? What does it look like for those individuals that come in that might be isolated? And how can we improve those systems to make sure that when they're coming here, that we're cultivating a system that wants them to stay, that they feel welcome, that they feel like they can continue to be supported, and that we don't have such a high, a high rate of turnover. We see that piece, and I guess I'm kind of mentioning both outsiders and insiders. Trying to retain teachers is huge for this district. And so looking at all of our systems across the board, are we being supportive? Are we engaging with these teachers? Are we giving them the thing that they need to excel, feel welcome, and want to get better every day?
Could you please describe your experience working in a turnaround district, and what do you see are the top 2 or 3 priorities for us right now with a turnaround?
So I have worked, when I was in Pueblo, I worked in the central office for a couple of years, and we had several schools. It was when it first was like beginning of turnaround, and we had a couple of schools that I supervised that were on turnaround. What I think is the most important thing is quality instruction, making sure that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, that we train our teachers. The reality is there's no silver bullet. There's nothing, we're not gonna bring a program in that's gonna automatically get us out of turnaround. The only thing that's gonna work is supporting our teachers, giving them the resources that they need, so that in their classrooms, they're able to engage kids at a high level. They're able to really instruct the kids at a level that meets our expectations, and we will be out of turnover. It is that simple. Like I said, there is all kinds of plans out there. There's all kinds of training, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure we have quality instructors in front of our kids, teaching a viable and guaranteed curriculum, that everyone has the same opportunities. That is how we will be able to get out of turnaround. And it's a lot of work. It sounds like a simple plan, but that is the commitment. It's what's happening in our classrooms, what's happening in our community, how we're supporting parents, how we're getting parents involved with their students, to make sure that we're, and what are the outside resources we bring in. So, but at the end of the day, we have to have quality instruction, and we have to train and support our teachers at a high level.
My experience supporting turnaround districts began in Sheridan Public Schools. It was on the turnaround block as they were transferring or switching superintendents from Mike Clough to Superintendent Pat Sandos. In that particular district, they were dealing with not only turnaround, but a significant enrollment challenge. Students were leaving the district because of perception of poor performance. So when I think about the strategies that we would need to engage in here in East Otero, after reading the school district's unified improvement plan, good teaching absolutely is very, very important. But to get there, we need good coaching. We need expert teachers helping our younger teachers or our novice teachers or teachers who just need a little bit of support, understanding what good teaching looks like in classrooms, what high quality instructional materials are, and how to make sure those are part of your lessons all of the time. And then a constant culture of using data to inform how you teach, what you're teaching, and what student groups need the most attention. And then I also think about my context, supporting Denver Public Schools alternative education campuses or AECs. Those particular schools often deal with some of our students who need the most needs, the most interventions. And so when I think about that in the East Otero context, I think it's very, very important that when we're identifying interventions for our students that need the one-on-one time with our teachers, we're making sure that these interventions are helping them really move the needle in a way that they could get the skills that are foundational for success in all classrooms, and that's literacy, most of the time math.
My experience working with turnaround schools, my first elementary school I started teaching in Florence, Colorado, is on turnaround. It gave me some of the greatest structure that I had. As far as lesson planning, boots on the ground, what do I do on a day-to-day basis? It helped me out tremendously. As we talk about these turnaround processes, as scary as they are and as dark as they sound, there's a lot of great things that come from it. The structures they provide, the supports they provide, the financial support they provide, and by that I mean state, it is a huge asset. And so being a teacher in that and then now stepping into a central office role in that, you start to see all the different supports that we can really tap into. I think so far, looking across the board, some of the biggest areas I would work on is first our financial status. I think here at East Otero, we've come a great ways, but we still have a lot of work to do around our financials, making sure that we're being as clear as we can with people, everything's aligned as it should, that we're on track with the state. We get all of that cleaned up so that then we can stop putting out the fires. And I'd like to say, instead of playing defense all the time, we can start to play offense. We can start to take some of that financial stuff, align it with what our strategic goals are going to be, and actually make these imaginary ideas a reality. Right now, it's like we have a lot of great ideas, and we struggle to have that framework piece to make them happen. And so I think that's one of the biggest things on our financial side. And then our academic side, we have a lot of great things in place. We have instructional coaches, we have interventionists, we have so many people that can help support our general classroom teachers. But it hasn't always been it doesn't appear that it's always been a clear top-down model from central office all the way down with what that looks like, what our initiatives are, and how we're going to get from A to Z or from where we're at to a higher level of success. I think working with TNTP, UVA has kind of highlighted some of that with our leadership within the district, but something that we can continue to work with and getting our teachers on that same page with identifying whether it be letter A, letter B, letter C, whatever our district has decided is our big rocks or our big goals, and how we collectively can get there, I think is a big step.
I was the principal of the turnaround building, and I'll tell you that it's demoralizing. And it really truly is, because you're working so hard every day. And I'll tell you that the teachers in that building were probably some of the finest educators I have ever worked with. I've worked in districts, the way this goes for some of you is, as you're accredited, you can be accredited with distinction, which is the highest, and then you're accredited. Then you have priority improvement, and turnaround. And so I worked in districts that were distinct, and I worked in districts that were accredited. And I'll tell you, some of the finest teachers I've ever worked with were the ones who were struggling down here in turnaround, priority improvement, and working really hard. We were one of the first to bring in a third party, or the state said you have to bring in a third party to help you straighten this out. We were the first to bring in Capturing Kids' Hearts, which I know is done here. And what we discovered was that when you look at a plan to implement, to start turning around student achievement, you have to commit to something with fidelity. It has to be with fidelity. And just, especially for teachers who are coming to school every day, wanting to succeed, wanting their kids to succeed, you need to give them wins. We need to find opportunities that we have a win, a legitimate win to celebrate. We started really digging into data and posting data and owning it. I mean, there are a lot of times when we want to say, we just don't want to look at that because it doesn't make us feel good. But we started really looking at the data. We started looking at who those kids are. We are small enough in this district to know which kids we can focus on. This is not like there are 30,000 kids. We're small enough to really look at that. When we started digging down to the level of the child, the student who was there, we started seeing the patterns. We started making some improvements. I looked back at that school district just recently, and that school district has received accreditation as accredited for the last 10 years. And it can happen. The demographics of that school district are exactly the same as the demographics of the school district, exactly the same. So I know you have incredibly gifted and passionate teachers here, and I know you have a good plan, and we need to make sure that we are doing it with fidelity and that we celebrate the wins and we don't close our eyes to anything we don't want to see.
So I'd like you to name the program or change that you were instrumental in implementing that did not have the desired outcome. What was your process and what would you do differently? Do you know the status of the program today and were you able to adapt and make corrections? I'm sorry, some of these questions have subsections, so if you need me to repeat, I will.
Absolutely. I think about a program that I'm working on right now for Denver Public Schools. So, given the unique context of our school district in Denver, we want to be as equitable and fair as possible when we're hiring folks. And one of our programs that I'm responsible for is our dean program in the school district. So as many of you know, deans typically feed into our assistant principal pool. And then if you have a great assistant principal, we want them to one day be a principal. In Denver Public Schools, we have a model where we have deans of culture and deans of instruction. Our deans of culture, up until a couple of years ago, just like everyone else on our administration spectrum, needed to have a bachelor's degree. But to be more fair to some of our office staff or restorative justice folks or student and engagement coordinators, we wanted to make sure if we had a great employee in our building, we give them a path to one day be an administrator. So right now I've been working with the state to get approval to recertify our dean program so our deans of culture could get college credit through on-the-job training in Denver Public Schools. It hasn't been as successful and the desired outcome has not happened as I'd like because the state has been so slow at CDE for approval. But I share this because it's about consistency and being relentless when having issues with the state or the Colorado community college system. It's about making sure that we're taking care of our employees and not giving up that long-term goal. Because when I do get approval, I know that deans and DPS are going to be very, very impacted by this because we're going to open up a whole new pool of employees that work very positively with our students, and that pathway will lead to a college degree for them. But hopefully by that time, I'll be here in East Otero.
One program that I began working on was our Data Day initiative. I started this as well as Charter Academy before here. And essentially, I had taken pieces of where I was at prior to that into the same realm where, as we talk about with educators, we always want to be data driven, but what does that look like? And sometimes I found that trying to get teachers to be able to dive into data to the depth that we need to, it's very difficult with all the day-to-day tasks that are asked of them. And so what I tried to do was started to develop schedules that allowed for designated days at your beginning, mid, and end of year. As soon as you get in your student test score data, meeting with teachers to where we are at each grade level talking about every specific student in that school. We're looking at where they're growing, where they're struggling, and what plan we have for every single student that we're in contact with. And that idea that we are small enough to get this microscopic lens that are gonna best help our students, and then really teach some of those practices to our teachers of what data-driven instruction looks like, what it looks like to break down a test, whether it be an NWEA test or just a general classroom test that you gave that week, and really look at some of those practices. Here at East Otero, we're very fortunate that we have people like our instructional coaches who can meet with our teachers on a more frequent basis. But with that program, one struggle that we found was really aligning the financial piece, always finding substitute teachers to give them that time off. Once we were able to do that, we had great success with that, kind of that initial struggle of getting some of the logistics down to get people time out of the classroom, to look at the data, to look at what we need to do for those kiddos, and then put it into action.
Well, I'd love to say I never had the initiative that I know, but that is not a true statement. There's a program that I still believe in today, and it's called Teacher Expectation Student Achievement, and TESA. And I think it's extraordinary. I really do. I think it's a great way to teach. The strategies and how you teach, how you present information is wonderful. I still use it. But in addition to it, it was teacher to teacher feedback. So, if I was in Marty and I were co-teachers, and I would go to her classroom and I would watch her, implement TESA, and I would give her some feedback, and then she would watch me and she would give me some feedback. And I thought, oh man, I know this staff, they love each other, they trust one another, they are gonna do this. I mean, they're gonna embrace this is gonna be awesome. And so I roll it out to them, and I said, so now, Marty, you're gonna go, and Monica, you're gonna go. And then all of a sudden I say to Marty, well, I think you could have done this, and Marty's no longer my friend. And so now that would not be Marty, because she's an amazing teacher, but and so we had these teachers who I thought, what is going on? They're going at it. How dare you tell me I'm not? And I thought, whoa, I misread where we were as a staff. We needed to do a whole lot more work in creating trust within one another and building up, our confidence in teaching, our confidence in being able to take some constructive feedback before we all of a sudden started jumping in and saying, I don't think you did that well, and who are you to tell me I'm not a good teacher, and it kind of just became a very successful thing. I still to this day believe in it, I really do, but I also know when you need to quit, right? And say, okay, we'll just step back. We won't do that anymore. That was a learning curve for sure.
So it's not really a program, but when I moved to Fountain Fort Carson High School, I was previously at East High School in Pueblo, and we did about once a week. I'd have teachers during our professional development time teach other teachers, and it was a great environment where they loved sharing ideas, different strategies, and the culture was there. So when I went to Fountain Fort Carson High School, I found two teachers that were doing amazing things. And I asked them to present to the rest of the staff. I think one was on planning, creating lesson plans. I can't remember what the other one was on, but I could see they were nervous. They I don't know if I want to get up in front of the staff and do this. And so they did it, and I thought they did a good job. But we did surveys, from all our teachers, how professional development went. And I noticed real quickly when I was reading all the surveys that I already know how to do that. Why are you wasting your time? It was really, I felt so bad for those two teachers I put out front, but we just kept moving, and we built trust, and now we have a culture where we have teachers begging us, hey, I would like to present this, I have this strategy, but I inherited a culture that was isolated. I mean, every teacher pretty much, there was no guaranteed viable curriculum. We weren't having to worry about turnaround status, which was the first time for me working in a school that wasn't in that area. So we really had to talk about what good teaching looks like, build trust with the staff, and over time, with our instructional coaches, with our administration, with our teacher leaders, it became a place where we're collaborative, and that is part of the school and who we are. We work together, we have a common vision, and it's to take care of all of our kids. So, you know, that learning from that experience and that doing the surveys and like being just eyes wide open, wow, to being able to take time to get where we need to be. It was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding.
I think it's Monica's, it's next, so.
Is it?
I have no, I've lost track. I think these like that. So, this one wasn't on the forms, but I think the community should get to hear your thoughts on this specific question that I have. You brought up the new funding formula. We all know that there have been deep cuts to funding and a lot of title cuts. We've also discussed how many of our initiatives, we have a lot of instructional coaches and interventionists, and those are typically funded with title monies. What is your experience and how do you plan to be creative in trying to help us maintain those so that we can continue this fight to get on a turnaround with this additional challenge?
Okay, so Senate Bill 1448 last year rewrote the School Finance Act. And it did put more money into public education, but it also divided the state because some districts were winners and some were losers. And we never want that to be, we've always been really united on that. And it was going to, and it will eventually put more money into public education. However, as soon as it passed, the state experienced a huge deficit. And what they wanted to do to fix the deficit was to push public education off the cliff, frankly, and totally get rid of averaging. So we pushed back. And so what we've ended up with is that 1448 will be phased in over additional years. It'll take longer to phase that in order for us to see that. So when you look at your funding formula, and you'll see that La Junta should receive 17 million, they're gonna get 16 million, because 1448 isn't gonna be fully implemented. You know, I took a quick look at the title funds that come into La Junta, and just in Title I is a little bit over $800,000. And if we combine that with IDEA, it's probably over $1 million. It probably comes into this district for title funds through the federal government. And that's what we talk about. When we're talking about title funds, we're talking about money that comes from the federal government. That's in addition to what the state, to the 16 million, that's the programming from the state. And now we know, if you've been watching the news, that those title funds have been held up. And that's a national issue, and we're working hard. The governors are working hard with the federal government to get that money released because it was already appropriated. And because school districts have already appropriated it in budgets that had to be passed in June, which meant that the majority of that money probably was allocated to salaries. And those salaries have already been committed. Those teachers have already been hired and they're already going. So that is why, Jared alluded to this a little bit earlier. A school district has to have a solid financial understanding of where they are. Their financial statements have to be updated and they have to be current. They have to know where they are with their fund balance, and that's why a district holds on to a fund balance. If you don't have a fund balance, when something like this happens, how do you pay your employees? So a fund balance in a district is their savings. When I was in Strasburg and first got there, they had $1 million deficit budgeted. And I said, well, you don't have $1 million in your fund balance. And so they said, we didn't realize that. So in 1 year, I had to balance a budget that was $1 million in the deficit. And then begin to build a fund balance. By the time I left there, we had a fund balance that would sustain the district if 1 full year worth of state funding was denied. We could survive on a fund balance. So when you look about, you know, how do we budget for something when you have stuff that happens that's unforeseen, like 1448 not being funded, like your title money being withheld, you have to make sure that you are planning in advance, that you have a strong financial fund balance, that you understand exactly where your finances are and that they're clean. Every month they're clean. Every month your audit is done on time and every month your financials are clean. So sometimes in the community will say, well, I don't understand why you have a fund balance of $2 million. This is why you have a fund balance of $2 million. Because over $1 million is going to be held up. It is really important that the superintendent is the CFO of the district this size. I mean, it's critical that the superintendent understands how schools are financed, what financial statements look like, how the school is supposed to report that, and that they are very much stewards of that and prepare. Because we cannot program for our kids if we don't know if we have any money. We cannot program for our kids if all of a sudden something happens and we don't have the money to support that. We just can't. And so we're precarious in Colorado. So this is my pitch to you. Talk to your legislators because this is a crisis in the state of Colorado. There's another $700 million deficit in the state of Colorado's budget, and they're going to look to us to help them balance that.
I think frightening is probably the best way to describe where we're at right now. There is no easy answer. There is not an easy answer with this right now. You want to have a short-term solution to be able to get through the day-to-day, but it's just like our own private budgets. We have to be thinking about the future and how we are going to create a strategic financial plan to, to make it through the storm and to hopefully get on the other side. But it's going to be really understanding the budget, understanding where we're at, understanding our priorities, and then doing our best to keep, when we have cuts, keep them as far away from the students as possible. I think that is something that has to be a priority. We want to make sure that when we have to make cuts, it's away from our kids. We don't want to be in the classrooms. We need to look at every other thing that, what can we take care of that we don't need today? Because we have to try to do our best to not have these cuts hit our classroom teachers, our interventionists, our coaches. We need to make sure that our students are taken care of. So it is a scary time in Colorado with all the budget forecasting, but it is really having the solution is having a really good understanding of our current situation, where we're at right now, short term, how do we get through the storm, and then having a long-term budget outlook of where we're headed and sticking to that, not being able to go buy something we can't afford. I think being honest about that and transparent with the community, because a lot of people don't understand all these different things in the Senate bills, but we want the best for our kids, and it's going to take a lot of work to be able to do that.
Our current political climate with title funds and our current state climate is definitely scary. But I think that we need to, as a district, think how we can be nimble and creative with what we do. As some of my colleagues have shared, we need to know our budget and know our priorities for our students. What is important in the day-to-day so we could commit to those things. And then we need to think outside of the box, right? We need to make sure that we're applying for every grant possible that our community is eligible for. We need to look at partnerships that will benefit our community and those community partners, and then sponsorships. I've had a very successful time at applying for EASY grants through my current position in Denver Public Schools. And EASY does not mean, EASY, it's EASI. And these are grants that help support very important initiatives across the state. So I think we as a district need to prioritize what initiatives are important to us, what programs are important to us, what are going to help our students be joyful and thrive in our classrooms, and then make sure we do all that we can as a community to fight for these funds together.
I'd just like to start by acknowledging everything that was said previous to me, and how accurate it was and how scary it may sound and how real that it is. as a superintendent, you have to be the CFO. You've gotta have a full grasp of what reality is financially. All areas, but financially, you've gotta have a full grasp and a clear picture of what that looks like. I think that's something that we're working towards, but again, something that we need to have. As I've seen some of those cuts and as we've talked, some of the questions that have come up, I keep hearing this relationship piece and this community piece. I think that that's something that the district leader moving forward is gonna have to really have at the front of their mindset, that there's systems and there's people, and when you start looking at cuts, which way are you gonna go? I think it's important to realize that it's important to our community that there are additional systems that we might have to get rid of. You talk about all the different partnerships that we have. As great as all of those are, it's more important to me to have the people here that we have, because I truly believe that's what's gonna move kids. That's what's gonna get the academics that we need. And so as you start looking at some of these cuts, how can we really be thoughtful of taking care of all of our people here? And how can we take some of the knowledge or some of the gains that we're getting from these outside entities and these outside systems, recreate those here, use the knowledge base that we have here, the people that we have that are skilled in these areas, get people in the right places and the right shoes that they need to be wearing, and recreate that while financially saving. And again, just putting people first and realizing that that is what's gonna move our kids. We have great curriculums, we're moving in a great trajectory for that. But we have gotta make sure that our people are taken care of, to make sure that all of our initiatives, all of our goals are being carried out effectively and efficiently.
Okay, so I did say we had a hard stop at 5:30 because we'd like to take these all, them all to go get them fed. It's been a really long day. I wanna say thank you to our community for submitting the questions. And I wanna say thank you so much for letting us put you in the hot seat live for our community to see. And I appreciate each of you having an interest in our community and our district to let us kind of put you through the ringer so we can get out of turnaround and do what's best for all of us. So if you guys would mind, thank you all for the